geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing, now in the liquor store near you. I'm John Bones of Twins Daily. With me, and a lot of news, is Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic.
Yeah, a lot to talk about.
We've got a lot to talk about. That's the thing about of doing the free show every 2 weeks now. We've got plenty to cover in the hour and a half that we've got here.
Yeah, although we've done like 4 Patreon podcasts since the last free one, and we still have a lot of new stuff because, and we talked about this a little bit over on the Patreon side of the street, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman.
Right.
Commercial free, which after this episode you may really value. Because of the nature of like the early off-season schedule, it sort of manufactures news whether you like it or not.
Yep.
And even for a team like the Twins, who aren't necessarily doing much, you still have to do some stuff because there are deadlines set up in November in terms of roster, in terms of Rule 5 protections, in terms of arbitration stuff, coaching staff. Obviously, we're going to get to all that stuff. Free agency is underway. There's been a couple of signings already, including Josh Naylor, significant signing. There are also some new TV stuff that we wanted to talk about. Not quite new. We'll talk about this further in the show because we got a lot to get to. But we did do like a 20-minute segment on the ESPN MLB TV situation like 3 months ago when that news came out.
Yep.
And I am happy to say that about 95% of that still plays.
That's right.
In terms of what we talked about. But we'll go over that because I know we've gotten a lot of questions about that. And I know we both talked to Twins official about that because they wanted to get the word out, which I appreciate that.
That was nice of them to be proactive about something like this.
Does it annoy you that they called me before they called you, John?
No, it does not annoy me at all.
Okay.
No.
It annoys me that they called me.
I actually end up wrap up a meeting. I'm like, hold it, why am I getting this call? I gotta go, and I wish I wouldn't have had to wrap up that meeting. So I would prefer he called 2 other people before he called me, actually, because I could have finished up the important meeting.
So many of my phone calls these days. And there's so many more than there used to be. I could go years without being on the phone before you knew that.
Yes, I do.
So many of them are, all right, I'm going to call bonus now. Like, all right, you could have just called him first. Anyway, we got a lot of stuff to get to. And also we have Rob Manfred. We can just touch this one off the top.
Right.
Cross it off the list. Rob Manfred spoke to some reporters a couple days ago, yesterday, and was asked about the Pohlad ownership situation, the minority, or the, what are they calling it? Not minority, limited partners.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. When you struggle for a word and you reach out to John for it, it's like trying to get.
Well, here's the thing.
I've been throwing you an anchor when you're drowning. It's like, just die.
It's funny because I was thinking, like, I keep calling it the minority partnership.
Yeah.
I know they don't want me to call it that. Because
I don't know why, like whatever. But anyway, Manfred, let me read you the full quote because it is one sentence. Manfred was asked, and Evan Drellick, who does a lot of good business stuff for The Athletic, reported on this, but I just want to read it because it's funny. Here's what Evan Drellick wrote, and this was like at the bottom of a thing that had a bunch of notes from talking to Manfred about much bigger topics. This is from Evan Drellick. The Pohlad family's efforts to sell minority stakes in the Minnesota Twins are ongoing, Manfred said. And then here's this quote from Manfred. Those non-control interest sales are in process, on track, and in process, Manfred said, sharing no further details. And people I know will note, and we will note here, that it was a couple months ago, right, where he said,
right.
It was more than a couple months ago. It was like in July, I guess, maybe around the All-Star break, something like that. I forget what his media session was doing, but he was asked about the fact that they had been on the market for like 8 or 9 months at that point without a sale. And he sort of smugly said, well, I know stuff that you don't know, and I know there's going to be a transaction. And then they pulled it off the market, and now we're still waiting 3 months for
that transaction ended up being minority stakes being potentially being purchased at some point. And we have been actually sort of, I'm glad you brought this up because I did want to in a show where we didn't have 10 other pieces of news, we probably would spend 20 minutes unpacking this. But the fact is that they announced that they had these new buyers or minority stakes buyers in August. And we were kind of like, well, it might take a while to wrap that up. I'm sure we'll get something by the owners' meetings. And this week I woke up on Monday morning and went, hey, it's the owners' meetings. I haven't heard anything. I did hear that we might hear something fairly soon from somebody,
I hope. I
we
mean,
haven't. But but meanwhile, one of the things we didn't mention about the Patreon.com, we also had a Patreon episode right after the GM meetings where we asked about whether or not we would find out who these owners were at some point, and Derek Falvey was kind of like, I think by the winter meetings,
right, which isn't about 3 weeks from now. Yeah,
Right.
John went to the
General manager
GM meetings
Right.
in Vegas,
Yeah.
and we kind of did a whole episode on Patreon early this week. Was it Monday probably?
Yeah.
Where we kind of went through all the stuff he learned or didn't learn from Derek Falvey, because you had a couple media sessions with him, and one of the things that at least I kind of got caught on and discussed a lot was the idea of him just kind of continuously kicking the can down the road and saying, well, we don't need to know what our payroll is yet. We don't need to know what the direction of the team is yet. And he did that at the end of the regular season. And then he did that a couple of weeks ago at the Shelton press conference. And then he did that at the GM meetings. And now he's kind of pointing to the winter meeting. Something tells me on December 7th or whatever, when media ask him the same questions, he might say something similar. And it all stems from ownership. And it all stems from A, the poll ads, obviously, but B, these limited partners, minority partners, whatever you want to call it, that it's now 3 months into that process on top of the 10 months where the team was on the market. And, we can sit here and say our assumption is that there's not some snag happening, but I will tell you that Manfred's inability to give any sort of comment on it doesn't, make people feel real great about the situation. And beyond that, as we see, trades and signings are already happening. And so if the front office is truly in a position, and I think this was my takeaway from kind of what you shared from being at the GM meetings and talking to Falvey, my takeaway was he's just, even more so than usual, which this is kind of the Twins' MO anyway, the front office is just really in a holding pattern here in terms of moves that might cost more than, $5 million or significant trades, where it's like they don't know if they're going to have spending room. And I'm kind of skeptical of that, that they truly don't know, given that he's the dual team president. But if that's the case, then this is hurting them. Like this whole ownership situation that continues to drag on, it not only creates uncertainty and questions from fans, which is natural, but it also creates uncertainty and questions and, increases the degree of difficulty for a front office that needs all the help it can get at this point.
Well, and as a result of that, like the one thing the safe strategy for Falvey is play it as conservative as you can play it. Like just you have to assume that the budget is going to be fairly low at this point. So until you get word that you've got a, budget at this level, you've got to kind of assume that you've got a budget as about as low as it's going to go. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing with the trade that went down today in terms of, where they are targeting their, the gaps they have in their lineup. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's the idea that they're going to be conservative and they're not going to spend much. That's par for the course. That's the default, obviously. They haven't traded for or signed someone who makes more than $6 million in almost 3 full years, like calendar years. So that's the assumption, but there are levels to that. I mean, there's a difference between that $95 million payroll and 115 or 135. And, the idea that no one's going to know until these minority shares get taken care of and approved, and those people have a voice in the room. It's like, all right, well, I mean, we're almost to December here. So, and, later today, we're recording this on Friday morning. Later today is the deadline to tender 2026 contracts to arbitration eligible players. And so, Trevor Larnach is a little bit up in the air. They just announced moments before we started the show that Justin Topa has avoided arbitration by agreeing to a 1-year deal. No word on the money there, but he was projected to make about $1.7 million via arbitration from MLB trade rumors. So I'm assuming it's that or maybe a little bit less than that, because they have an ability to kind of squeeze relievers in these spots. But these are small scale decisions. However, as you're going to see today and even yesterday, arbitration eligible players a lot of times get traded because teams are like, well, we're not sure, but he fits. One of the trades we're going to talk about, Alex Jackson, catcher from the Orioles, was arbitration eligible, and they didn't want him at that price, and they traded him to the Twins. And so, what is Falvey able to do or motivated to do while he's in this holding pattern, I think is a legitimate question, because, like, would he be able to swing if he gets blown away with a, Pablo Lopez trade offer, or some sort of hitter for pitcher swap presents itself, but the players involved make $5 million or $10 million or more, is he able to pull the trigger on those trades, or is he basically like, well, hopefully the minority owners come in soon so I can actually get approval for them for this?
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, we won't have the full arbitration scope, although Patreon subscribers will get that at worst Monday morning. We'll see.
Probably Monday morning we'll go through all the arbitration decisions they made and whether or not any additional trades happen from that. We like to do, if there's an emergency trade or even a little urgency trade, we like to cover that on the patreon.com/Gleeman. And we'd love to have you join us if you're listening. If you listen to this podcast and you like, boy, I'd like to talk a little bit of Twins more than about once every 2 weeks, come join us on the Patreon side. It's really fun, actually.
And if you think these shows are kind of uncensored or unfiltered at the very least,
right,
go behind the paywall, our little private club, and it's commercial free too.
The other thing is they're commercial free, which we should probably just jump in with one commercial, real quickly.
So arbitration wise, we're not going to know the full scope of that until tonight, which is the deadline Friday night. We know Topa signed, which makes sense, 1.7. We talked about that. He's not a high leverage reliever, but he's a functional major league reliever, and they need that at this point. The only real question in my mind is Larnach, so we'll see later about that.
Yeah.
Jeffers, Joe Ryan, Royce Lewis, Bailey Ober, Cole Sands. To me, those are all no-brainers. That doesn't mean they couldn't trade those guys, but at those price points, I think those are all relative no-brainers. Before we get into the two trades the Twins have made so far as of Friday late morning, let's talk about our presenting sponsor now.
That really keeps this episode free for everybody out there. Black Stack Brewing. They've been now a presenting sponsor for, I think, a full year. And one of the reasons that drove them to sort of look at that was they wanted to make it known that they've got their beer available in liquor stores everywhere now. They've got a new distributor a little over a year and a half ago. So you can now find it all over the state of Minnesota, from Grand Marais to Rochester, Winona to Fargo. And it doesn't even stop at the border. Iowa, Wisconsin, North and South Dakota, even some further away, far-flung places like Arizona, Washington, Florida, etc. And you can find their normal beers, like their flagship beers, I guess, for lack of a better word. Local 755, New England IPA. We served that at my daughter's wedding. Slopes Pilsner, served at my daughter's wedding. We ran out of this stuff because it was so good, right? But they also have these special weekly releases, and their latest one is a collaboration with Barrel Theory. And if you know anything about IPAs, the two places, local craft places that just absolutely kick butt on local IPAs are Black Stack Brewing and Barrel Theory. And that's who they are collaborating with on this new beer called Local Drops, which I found out about this about 3 days ago. I'm actually angry with myself for not finding time to get to a liquor store and buy it yet, because it's going to be absolutely outstanding. So check out the local liquor stores. Also check out their tap room, which is, let's see, over 94 and near 94 and 280. They've got an enormous screen where you can watch the Vikings. Maybe I'll try to watch the Vikings-Packers game there Sunday. That might be a good place. It's one of the largest tap rooms of the state of Minnesota, former Spam Can Factory. And if you go there, you can get home 4-packs. And if you mention the code word, Gleeman and the Geek, you're going to get $2 off their 4-packs. And they have even more beers there than they have at the local liquor stores. But stop by either one. Black Stack Brewing, presenter of Gleeman and the Geek.
Okay. Let's get to these trades. So there's two trades. These I would describe as minor trades, although they are for major leaguers. So we'll talk about them here. The first one came on the same kind of timeline as the Rule 5 protection additions, which was, Tuesday?
Yeah.
And that makes sense because that's when teams have a roster crunch. That and the arbitration one, which is tonight, sort of grease the wheels for some minor trades here as teams go, are you going to keep this guy or not? We might like this guy that you don't. So the first one, let's talk about. They acquired a 28-year-old reliever named Eric Orze, O-R-Z-E, Eric Orze, right-handed reliever from the Tampa Bay Rays. They gave up 2024 14th round pick Jacob Kisting, who's had a pretty good first full season, but a fairly marginal prospect. I mean, I don't think it's impossible that he becomes a major leaguer, but a good outcome for him would be coming as good as the guy they just got. And as we touched on a second ago in regard to Topa, they just desperately, desperately need functional major league caliber relievers.
It's going to be one of the priorities. It has to be one of the priorities this offseason. But in particular, what we came away from the GM meetings with is like we're going to see them pick up some arms that are not necessarily going to be high high caliber or high priced arms. We're going to see them flood the zone with some guys they think have some upside, and this is where Orze, qualifies.
Yeah, so he's 28 and he pitched 42 innings for the Rays last year, 3.02 ERA, 40 strikeouts, 19 walks. Some of the secondary numbers paint a little less rosy picture than a 3.02 ERA, but he was, certainly a functional middle reliever. Although after getting that performance, they basically stashed him at AAA for most of the second half. You look at his minor league numbers and huge strikeout totals. We're talking 12, 13, 14 strikeouts per 9 innings, but also huge walk totals.
Right.
We're talking 5, 6 walks per 9 innings. And, that kind of comes with the territory of picking up flyer relievers, like you mentioned. You can certainly see he's got like a 93, 95 mile an hour fastball, very good splitter that he leans on like over half the time, which kind of acts as a changeup for him. Sure. And then a third pitch, which is a slider, which actually in the majors just got absolutely destroyed. But he had very good swing and miss on the splitter, okay but not great fastball in terms of velocity. You can see how that racks up strikeout totals in the minors. Probably won't do that in the majors, but he got 40 in 42 innings. The key for him, obviously, is just going to be limiting walks. But I think this is a pretty sensible, logical, straightforward move where you trade kind of a marginal prospect that you drafted in the mid rounds or the late rounds a couple years ago for a 28-year-old reliever who you can probably plug in, as kind of your 5th or 6th guy, hopefully, in an 8-man bullpen, hopefully not higher than that.
And hope it's also he has some upside, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and you hope he has some upside, which is, I think, fair to assume with him. He also has a minor league option remaining for 2026, which means Orze can be stashed at AAA, although I would probably say if you get to the point where you're stashing him at AAA, it means either you're not thrilled with trading for him at that point, or more optimistically, you've added a whole bunch of relievers and he's pushed out, which I'm pretty skeptical of that happening. But the one thing I know people always bring up with the Rays, and we've talked about this, we actually talked about this with Thad Levine, former Twins general manager.
Yes.
There's a whole Patreon episode. You can see it on video if you go to Patreon. The whole archive is free. About when they traded for Joe Ryan in mid-2021 from the Rays, they traded Nelson Cruz for him. We were talking to Thad Levine about, the Rays have a pretty great reputation for player development, but specifically kind of under the radar pitchers. And I'll even go a step further, relief pitchers. They churn and burn through relievers almost every year and almost always have a very, very good bullpen. And so we asked Thad Levine about Joe Ryan and were you guys a little scared of what do the Rays know that we don't know about this guys? Or do we really think we're going to get one over on, of all teams, the Tampa Bay Rays about a young pitcher? And his point was, yeah, I mean, that's true, but we got to be confident with what we think about Joe Ryan. And he kind of laid out the things that stood out about Joe Ryan, and that's come true and then some. I mean, obviously Joe Ryan's developed even far beyond what they could have optimistically expected. They also made a trade with the Rays a while back for Jake Odorizzi. I mean, I remember, and that turned out to be a decent trade too. So,
I mean, the other thing about trading with the Rays though is they have some depth in that area, right? And especially when it comes to the bullpen. You mentioned, well, look, they stashed Orze in AAA. Well, yeah, they've got a good bullpen. So the guys that they've stashed at AAA are guys that you can squint your eyes and think this guy could probably be towards the bottom half of our bullpen, maybe even the middle of our bullpen. The Rays just have a wealth of knowledge.
Although a prime aged, minimum salaried, 0 years of service time guy fits the Rays what they're looking for just
exactly
as much and more as they're. So it's not, there's some skepticism built in there. The Rays also just make a ton of trades. I mean, they are just extremely active. I wouldn't be surprised if their sort of internal methodology is just try to win every trade by a tiny amount and make 1 billion trades. And you'll just sort of, in the volume, you'll come out ahead there. But so I on that one, makes sense to me. I think the price is right. I think he's 28, got some major league experience, will be minimum salaried for 3 more years, can be optioned to AAA, right-handed. You can slot him into a middle relief role. I mean, at this point, it's basically Cole Sands, Topa, and Orze from the right side, and probably Funderburk from the left side. So that gives you 4 out of 8 spots. I don't want to say full, but at least sort of somewhat penciled in there that you can start to build a worst case scenario and go from there. Which I think the Twins kind of like doing that as a front office. And then moments ago,
just one more thing. I think what we're going to see on this is I think there's going to be like the first step. We're going to be talking about this same type of acquisition either via free agency or a waiver pickup or something like that 3 or 4 more other times this offseason, right? Like that this is going to be what we think we're going to be seeing from them at least a couple more times, I would think.
I guess I would differentiate. I have no problem with that. I mean, the way to build bullpens is basically, in my mind at least, convert starters to relievers, which the Twins have had an incredible amount of success with over the years.
Yep.
Duran and Jax and Varlin, and going back to Joe Nathan and Rogers and Guardado and Perkins, et cetera, et cetera. Convert, high upside or, good raw stuff starters who, for whatever reason, you don't think can succeed as starters, convert them to the bullpen, which I expect them to do, at least with a couple guys. And then, try to take flyers on scrap heap pickups. Go, someone who's caught your eye in another organization like Orze, or you try to sign guys coming back from injury like they did with Brock Stewart a few years ago, or, you try to sign your own guys to minor league deals with the promise of you'll get a shot to compete for a bullpen spot. So I have no problem with that. I mean, that is the way to build bullpen depth, particularly in their situation. But what I will say is, if they don't at least bring in 1 or 2 actual proven veteran major league relievers, and I'm not talking about going getting Edwin Diaz.
Sure.
I'm talking about, the Sergio Romo, Tyler Clippard, Danny Coulomb, even last offseason type of guys. Just the guys who've been around the block and have proven it over 5-10 years, where like you can hand this guy the ball in the 7th inning with a 1-run lead and feel at least, okay with it. That to me is going to be the difference between whether they're actually motivated to win next season, even within the self-imposed, spending limits that we discussed at the beginning, or are they just like, we have no money, we'll go purely scrap heap trades and pickups, which that doesn't mean that can't work, and it could potentially work even better than some of these veteran guys. But given the relatively low cost of, decent setup man on the free agent market, you're talking about plenty of guys available 1 year, $5, $6, $7 million deals, or even below that. Coulomb cost them $3 million last year as a decent lefty. Like, to me, if they don't at least wade into those waters a little bit, that will tell you a lot about what their true situation is. But we may not know that until, spring training, because the reliever market tends to be kind of musical chairs, and their MO over the years has been, to wait that out. Before we talk about Alex Jackson, who is the second trade, which they made moments ago, let's talk about our next couple of sponsors here. One of them is BetterHelp, which they've been a sponsor for a while too. The way BetterHelp works basically is, if you have something in your life that you've been wanting to get some help with, or just talk to someone about, a professional, and some days you wake up and you want to do it, and some days you wake up and you're like, I don't want to talk to anybody about this. But the days you wake up and you want to do it, what you really don't need is any barriers in front of you in terms of insurance, in terms of having to wait a month to see someone. What BetterHelp can do is typically within a few days, they can set you up with a real licensed professional, someone tailored to what your issue is. And also they can tailor the experience to what you're comfortable with too. So like, if you want to do a video chat, you do a video chat. If you don't want to be on camera, you do a phone call. If you're like me and you hate being on the phone, you can just type back and forth. They can tailor it to whatever fits your mentality on what you're comfortable with. Talk to a real licensed professional about whatever is bugging you. And then you don't have to keep waking up and thinking, I should probably talk to someone about this. And they have a special deal.
This month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it easier to take that first step. Our listeners will get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/Gleeman. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gleeman. Check that out. And then I want to talk a little bit about something I've kind of learned a little bit about and jumped into with both feet. I'm doing some weight loss stuff, and one of the challenges with weight loss is you need to be able to get enough protein. So we reached out to Momentous because I wanted to take their protein powder, which by the way is yummy and vanilla and such. But they called out to me, "Hey, are you also doing creatine?" And I'm like, I don't know, I need to really develop muscle mass because that's what I knew about creatine. But now there's all kinds of stuff about creatine also. Turns out your brain's a muscle. And that is, there's some studies that are showing that it helps with things like long-term memory. And Aaron, do I need help with my long-term memory? I'll just ask you about Chris Parmalee as an example.
Short-term memory wouldn't be bad either, but yes, you do need help on your long-term
Well,
memory.
that's true. So anyway, Momentous also helps out with creatine. Creatine is something that it isn't just for building muscles. It's become a daily essential for strength and focus, recovery and aging, cognitive performance. And it's even easier now with they now have creatine chews, these bite-sized lemon lime chews that you can have. I've actually just also used their powder, which is Creapure powder. And so it is one of those things where whether you're training or working or traveling, I'm finding it's an easy thing to do on a daily basis. And unlike generic brands, Momentous doesn't follow trends. They perfect the fundamentals. This is creatine done right. So right now, Momentous is offering our listeners up to 35% off your first order with the promo code Gleeman. So you go to livemomentous.com and use that's all one word, livemomentous.com, and use the promo code Gleeman for up to 35% off your first order. That's livemomentous.com, promo code Gleeman.
Okay, let's test that short-term memory, John.
All right.
What were we going to talk about now?
We are going to talk about the trade of Alex Jackson to the Minnesota Twins to get our new backup catcher.
Look at you, John.
I'm telling you, it works, Aaron.
It's already working. That would have been really sad if you just like stared blankly into the camera for 45 minutes.
Why are you on my screen?
And then Chrissy came in with like a net and just took you out of the room. And it went to black. Anyway, Alex Jackson trade happened moments before we started recording. 29-year-old backup catcher Alex Jackson, acquired from the Baltimore Orioles. He was, as we talked about at the beginning, arbitration eligible, which you start to see some roster shuffling here. They obviously determined they didn't want to pay him the projected $1.8 million figure that MLB Trade Rumors assigns to him through the arbitration process. Or they just like Peyton Eales, who the Twins traded to the Orioles for him. We've talked probably too much about Peyton Eales over the years because he's sort of a cult hero among prospect watchers because he's about 4'7", and was signed out of
he's
independent
listed
leagues.
at 5'5".
yeah, okay. I'm 6'4" then. But it's an interesting trade because it's like they signed Peyton Eales out of indie ball a few years ago, and then he really kind of broke out and got himself to AAA within like a year with some very high batting averages, stolen base totals, walk totals, very few strikeouts. And then this past year at AAA, he had played some there in 2024 with the Saints and hit pretty well, but then went back there, had some injuries at the beginning of the season, and then didn't hit particularly well, kind of 270 without any power.
Yeah.
And
but I mean, the without power thing is probably going to be the case going forward in general with him. He's going to be an on-base machine, or that his hope would be to be an on-base machine that steals bases, moves himself around the bases.
Yeah,
but
the problem with guys who don't have any power really at all, and we've talked about this over the years with some other prospects. It's one thing to be able to draw walks against pitchers who have bad command and bad control in the low minors, or even to some extent at AA and AAA, which he's done. He has really good bat to ball skills. Good eye at the plate. He doesn't strike out much. He can sort of grind his way through these at-bats, and pitchers make a couple of mistakes, and he's on base. But first of all, major league pitchers just have significantly better control. They can throw strikes almost always when they need to. Beyond that, if major league pitchers are not scared of the hitter in terms of their ability to do damage against them with extra base hits or home runs, they will just pound the strike zone against them and try to overwhelm them, because the last thing they want to do is walk a guy whose, best case scenario is to hit a single against them anyway. And so that's not to say Peyton Eales can't have a major league career. I won't be shocked if he has a couple of years with the Orioles or wherever he ends up as a utility player. But I will say that he's a pretty low upside player. I think he's capable of playing shortstop, but he's not going to be a plus shortstop. He's going to be more of a second base, corner outfield, third base maybe type of guy. Those guys have value. I mean, he can be a decent bench player, and obviously the Orioles, that's what they're targeting him for. But I just never got the sense, and obviously we've talked about this with a couple other guys. Carler Fedko, we talked about a couple days ago, them leaving him unprotected for the Rule 5 draft was no surprise, even though he had a really great year in the minors. But if they liked Kyler Fedko, they would have called him up in September when they had a million openings.
Yeah, that's the telltale sign, right? Is they traded away 10 guys at the trade deadline, and as much as we were, as much as an intriguing player Peyton Eales might be, and there's a lot of intrigue about him. The Twins clearly either didn't really believe in him that much, or felt like they had to give that playing time to other players in the infield, which I kind of get. Like Brooksley needs some time, and
Ryan Fitzgerald, 31-year-old journeyman.
Well, fair point. Yeah. Okay. Good point.
Yeah. I mean, this is not a knock. We're trying to figure out the Twins' thinking on this. I'm not trying to, pass judgment on Peyton Eales. Right. Although I will say, if Peyton Eales was 6'1", nobody would be asking us about it.
Well, that's
basically
true.
But that's fine. I mean, I like an underdog story. So anyway, he goes to the Orioles for 29-year-old catcher Alex Jackson. Here's where I differ on this compared to the Eric Orze trade, which to me seems very straightforward, very logical. In one sense, this is straightforward and logical in that, as we've discussed here, Christian Vasquez is a free agent.
Yeah.
And they have Johnny Pareda, at least at this exact moment, they have Johnny Pareda and Mickey Gasper behind Ryan Jeffers on the catcher depth chart. I'm here to tell you that they were not comfortable trusting either of those guys as the backup catcher next season. And there's also the possibility that Jeffers gets traded himself, in which case they just need a bunch of catching. So it seems logical here that Jackson is just the replacement for Vasquez as the timeshare or backup to Ryan Jeffers. And that's fine. I mean, he's a good defender. Pitch framing, pitch blocking, throwing, all that stuff. He checks all the boxes that you would want in a backup catcher. And, the bar offensively for the backup catcher spot is, on the floor, basically.
Sure, right.
I mean,
especially after last year with Christian Vasquez.
Well, right. But I just mean like league-wide.
Yeah, right.
Especially for the Twins. Like, I mean, catcher is annually the worst hitting position across baseball. And the way that works basically is the more physically demanding the position is from both a durability standpoint or a skill set standpoint,
right,
the lower the bar for offense is, because the pool of players who can be good catchers and hit is tiny, whereas the pool of players who can be good left fielders or first baseman and hit is vast. And so you see catcher, center field, shortstop. Catcher is almost always at the bottom of the barrel in terms of league-wide production offensively. And then you talk about backup catchers, where it's, 50 points of OPS lower than that. And so, even someone like Vasquez, who really struggled offensively in his 3-year, $30 million deal with the Twins, I think largely was a disappointment, and especially last year really struggled offensively because now he's in his mid-30s. He's not that far off in terms of like a 600 OPS, let's say, of kind of the norm for a backup catcher. And now here is where I tell you, however, that Alex Jackson is a career 153, yes, 153, 153 hitter in 160 major league games. And he has shown more than that at AAA.
Yes.
I mean, let's hope. If he hadn't, that'd be really something.
Right.
But
and he had a decent-ish year last year. Better numbers last year.
75 at bats.
100 plate appearances. Granted. Right. And more better in AAA too. But yeah, keep going.
He's a career 223 hitter at AAA.
That's right.
And guys who hit 223 at AAA tend to hit below 200 in the majors. This is obviously them targeting defense, which is fine. If you're going to target defense at any position, make it catcher. But this guy's 29. I believe that the Twins will be either his 8th or his 9th organization.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
I mean, he's really bounced around, and his numbers are pretty ugly. And even last year or this past season, where you're saying he had good numbers in 90 plate appearances or whatever, he basically just popped a few homers.
Sure, right.
Like,
but that's in fact what he can do, right? Like and that's not an unusual skill set for a backup catcher. Like, play really good defense, pop just enough homers that we can justify your crummy batting average and how many strikeouts you've got, and and we'll see you every fourth day, or we'll see you the day game following the night game. That's
now.
it.
He has 11 home runs in 440 plate appearances in the majors. So that hasn't even really panned out.
You're right. We've seen it at AAA, but we haven't seen it in the majors, period. Right.
I mean, he has raw power. He was actually a top 5 pick of the Mariners way back in over a decade ago as a teenager coming out of high school.
And he's got a 500 slugging percentage in AAA. But
but we've seen that with some Saints guys too.
Sure. Right.
I mean, I think he's a 240 hitter, 323 on base percentage. Those are AAA numbers.
Yeah.
366 strikeouts in 313 games. I'm trying to prepare people for what they're going to see for him.
Sure, for sure.
I mean,
yes.
I have no problem acquiring a weak hitting, good fielding backup catcher. And if you're going to be weak hitting, you know, the ability to pop a homer once in a while is good, I guess.
Right, yes,
but
right.
this is a guy who has hit 153 in 440 plate appearances in the majors. That includes 179 strikeouts in 440 plate appearances. I mean, you're just not that's a over 40% strikeout rate. Just so people know, like like Matt Wallner has like a 30-something, low 30% strikeout rate.
Right.
This guy strikes out like 1/3 more than Matt Wallner. And almost double the league average. And you look at the minor league numbers, yeah, they're better, obviously, but it's the same player profile. So I have a lot of skepticism that he can just hit at all. Now, what does he realistically have to hit to be a useful backup catcher? I mean, 190, something like that.
Sure.
190 with a handful of homers and good defense. Now, is that the type of guy you want to pay $1.8 million for, which is about $1 million more than the minimum salary? And the type of guy that you want to send Peyton Eels for, you know, it seems maybe a little overkill. Like you're telling me there wasn't a different good defender who can't hit that they could have picked up. But, you know, end of the day, $1 million isn't that much even to the Twins. And like I said, I don't think they were necessarily going to use Peyton Eel.
When I saw this trade, my first thought was, I wonder if they're going to have bring in Alex Jackson and somebody like kind of Alex Jackson in spring training and say, okay, one of the two of you is going to make it, the other is going to be a AAA. And then I saw, well, they're paying him 1.8, but I mean, he's arbitration eligible. When you're committing that kind of money, you're pretty much signing up for him as the backup catcher.
Yeah, I mean, one thing they're not going to do is eat money unnecessarily at this point. So, you know, it's we were actually. Had this not happened, we were maybe going to go over some backup catcher options today.
That is right.
Including, you know, Christian Vasquez and some other low wattage options. And I was going to basically say those guys are probably likely to cost $2 to $4 million. Well, this guy costs 1.8. He's cheap. He's under team control. The defense is nice. I don't want to, you know, overlook the defense. I mean, their defense at catcher was pretty bad last year. I mean, Vasquez was okay, but has clearly slipped from where he was in his 20s. Jeffers has, in my mind, really regressed from a point that was kind of average-ish defensively. And then Pareda and Gasper, when they got an opportunity because of the injuries in September, they were both pretty rough defensively too. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Twins were just like, who's the best defender we can go get cheaply? And Jackson is definitely that. He checks all those boxes. I just, you know.
And I mean, despite being a quote unquote, you know, veteran, because he's 29 years old, he's been with 8 organizations. The fact is, he's not really a veteran major league catcher either. You know, he's a veteran AAA catcher, veteran minor league catcher, but they already have sort of Jeffers in that role. Like Jeffers can be sort of the veteran catcher for the.
Well, and yeah, I mean, you're saying that because he's only played basically 160 games in the majors.
Right.
But keep in mind, he's been in a backup role. So if he's played 160 games, that probably means he's been on the bench for 300 games.
Yeah, that's right.
So he has been in the majors. He has been working with pitchers. He checks all those boxes. I'm not trying to downplay that. But even last year, or this past season, when he had a 473 slugging percentage, thanks to 5 homers, which should not be overlooked. That's great. 37 strikeouts and 5 walks. This is a guy who is kind of closing his eyes and swinging up there. And I'm certain that the fact that he was once a top 5 pick gets him opportunities that maybe similarly struggling offensive players wouldn't get. Just for the roster housekeeping involved in that, they DFA, designated for assignment, Deshaun Kersey Jr. To make room for Jackson on the 40-man roster. That makes sense. I mean, we saw Deshaun Kersey Jr., capable defender, major league caliber outfielder, defensively, major league caliber runner and base stealer. And, you know, he really only got a very minimal opportunity offensively where he would get a start once every 3 weeks and come off the bench and all that. Yeah. But he really looked overmatched, not dissimilar from Alex Jackson.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Probably even worse than that. And so not surprisingly, they added James Outman. They've added some other outfielders. They have some young outfielders coming up. It doesn't surprise me that he was DFA'd. In fact, I'm surprised that, and we talked about this on the Patreon a couple of weeks. I'm surprised that Kersey and a few others, Gasper, Pareda, etc., were not cut from the 40-man roster in that first round of trimmings that happened. But there's no harm in holding them an extra week or two. Here's one thing I'll say: like, these are very low wattage moves that I'm about to say, and these are just kind of the first things you do.
Right.
And I'm not saying either of these guys are projected for a big role. I'm not saying these are the extent of the moves by any means. But since the season ended, the Twins have acquired 2 position players, Alex Jackson and Ryan Kreidler.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Alex Jackson is a career 150 hitter, 153 hitter, excuse me, those 3 points I want to give him, in 160 Major League games. Ryan Kreidler is a career 138 hitter in like 90 Major League games.
So they're leaning into the sabermetric. It's not all about batting average, Aaron.
Yeah. I'd like to see it be
Really
about on base
leaning
percentage, though.
into
It's just a funny thing. Like, it's just one of many where you just go, yeah, I kind of get it, but like, my God, like, what are fans supposed to make of this thing? So, Kreidler may not even make it to the season on the 40-man roster. Who knows? He's kind of a waiver. But yeah, to your point about the money, I would anticipate Jackson being the backup to Jeffers, or if they trade Jeffers,
it has to be, right.
And $1.8 million for that is pretty cheap. But I don't know, just strikes me as kind of a blind dart throw. Basically.
Yeah, I mean, taking a look at when we talked about the catching markets, I mean, Vasquez was bad, and he's a backup catcher at this point. Sort of, he's also probably like the 4th best catcher on the free agent market right now. Like, the catching market is just super thin, right? And you're going to have to get somebody from another organization that's floating around. This is sort of the definition of a replacement level player. Like, I think midway through this year, the Orioles picked him up off of waivers from the Yankees or something. Like, he was definitely.
I tell you, 160 Major League games, he is negative 0.6 WAR, which means he's a below replacement level player,
right?
Which when you hit 150, that
right.
now, but
I'm not talking about WAR here. I'm just talking about, like, this is the kind of guy you can find floating around between AAA and the majors that is available to a lot of teams. And maybe they could have settled on a different skill set, but I mean. Right. I personally, I'd probably like to have rather seen, a left-handed catcher or something, but
well, it's funny. Like, I
here's as to which bad catcher I end up taking for my backup catcher spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's a couple things on this. I agree with all that.
Right.
One, you're allowed to develop catchers who are capable of being backups, which the Twins have known. The Vasquez deal was up in 3 years for 3 years. They failed to do that, basically. Yeah. Beyond that, you're allowed to go scout someone in another organization, waiver claims, minor league signings. To give up a marginal prospect in $1.8 million, that's not some huge price tag, but it is somewhat paying a premium for a guy who's hit a 150. And then the other thing I'll say is it's very easy to just lump all these type of players in as bad hitters. But there, like we said with the payroll at the beginning, there's levels to low payrolls. Sure. And 150 is abysmal. It's not bad. I mean,
well, the 40% strikeout rate is even more abysmal.
Right. And I mean, he has a 527 career OPS. Think of how bad Christian Vasquez was as a hitter over 3 years with the Minnesota Twins. 577 career OPS. Right. His OPS is 50 points higher than Alex Jackson's. Now, I'm willing to believe Alex Jackson, if you gave him an opportunity, isn't really a 153 hitter, but I'm not so sure he's not like a 183 hitter. And I don't know. It just seems this is not the move of a team that is looking for upside. Let's put it that way. So before we talk a little bit about the coaching staff, which has been filled out, let's hit on our next couple of sponsors here.
Yeah.
Let's see. What do we got?
Factor. Here? Oh, good.
Ah, right.
Oh, I like Factor so much. Factor, basically, I think of it almost as a food hack. Like, if you're trying to figure out how to eat in a efficient and healthy way that is, quick and easy and just always available, Factor is absolutely your call. They come with a little, packets, and it's really tasty food. Like, it's chef-inspired stuff. I keep talking about their butter chicken. It's one of the better butter chickens I've ever had.
Fully prepared, by the way.
Yeah, so you don't have to make it. That's right. Yeah, you put it in the microwave.
You just pop it in within minutes. Good meal, healthy meal. You can also choose what you want Like,
Right.
do you want, meat heavy? Do you want vegetarian? Do you want kid friendly? Do you want all that stuff?
Yep.
And you can also tailor it to certain diets
Right.
that way too.
They have a
They
new
send it right to you.
Mediterranean diet option. New Mediterranean diet option. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
they
good.
send it right to you, fully prepared. We've both tried it multiple times.
Yeah.
You just pop it in the microwave. You got a meal, easy, no cooking, no cleanup.
No.
You can eat smart at
Right.
factormeals.com/Gleeman50off and use the code Gleeman50off because you get 50% off your first box. Plus, they will give you free breakfast for 1 year. So use the code Gleeman50off, Gleeman50off, one word there, at factormeals.com for 50% off your first box, plus free breakfast for 1 year. Get delicious, ready to eat meals delivered with Factor. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto renewing subscription purchases. That's factormeals.com/Gleeman50off and use the code
And
Gleeman50
our other
off.
sponsor is Hims. I don't know exactly whatever problem you're kind of dealing with that you don't want to necessarily go see a doctor about. I would maybe some of those problems. I would maybe suggest going to hims.com and checking out with them. I'll start with hair loss. Hair loss isn't something that everybody is comfortable with, and I'm myself am like, yeah, I should probably maybe give it some thought to doing this. And Hims offers a convenient access to a range of prescription hair loss treatments with ingredients that work, including chews, oral medication, serums, sprays. It's doctor trusted ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil can stop further hair loss and regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. So you don't have to go out of your way to do this. You can brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatment plans that put your goals first. So no hidden fees, no surprise costs, just real personalized care on your schedule. Think of Hims as your digital front door that gets you back to your old self with simple 100% online access to trusted treatments for real health concerns all in one place. So for simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/Gleeman. That's hims, HIMS.com/Gleeman for a free online visit. It's hims.com/Gleeman. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information.
Okay. Also, since we did the last free show, they have finalized the coaching staff
Right.
under Derek Shelton at manager. We talked kind of in depth about the process, the individual people, the James Rousen.
As we learned the news, we did it. It's over 3 or 4 different Patreon episodes. You can find us breaking down the various ones, right?
So let's just go over the whole group here
Sure.
to get a sense of it. So obviously Derek Shelton's the manager. Mark Hallberg is the bench coach, and he comes from the San Francisco Giants, where he was third base coach, first base coach. I think he was a hitting something early on. He spent, I think, 6 years or 7 years with the Giants. He's your new bench coach. Now, I'll tell you that they wanted James Rousen for that role.
Yeah.
James Rousen was the runner-up to Shelton for the manager job, and they liked him from when he was the Twins hitting coach, but the Yankees would not, it's my understanding at least, that the Yankees would not let him out of his contract, so they moved on to Mark Hallberg, and then Mike Rabello is your assistant bench coach, and he was with Shelton in Pittsburgh. I think he was the field coordinator in Pittsburgh for a number of years, was a catcher in the majors for a couple of brief stints. So he'll also work with the catchers, although it should be noted Shelton was also a catcher too.
Yeah.
So those are your sort of 2 right-hand men for Shelton, one coming from the Giants, one coming from the Pirates, where they worked under Shelton for years in Pittsburgh. On the pitching side, they kept Pete Mackey, who's been the pitching coach since mid-2022, and they kept Luis Ramirez, who has been the assistant pitching coach, and then they added LaTroy Hawkins as the bullpen coach, which is also sort of an assistant pitching coach. That he replaces Colby Suggs, who I think got the same job in Texas, although I'm not 100%.
I know he went someplace. I don't remember
sure
where.
about that, but he was allowed to. I think his contract was up with the Twins. So that's your pitching trio: Mackey, Ramirez, LaTroy Hawkins. I am, intrigued by Hawkins, especially.
Yeah. Yep.
The Mackey thing. He's had some good results with some players. Their kind of advanced metrics are always much better than their actual ERAs. They were 25th in ERA this year. They were 21st in ERA last year. They've been 18th overall out of 30 teams in ERA since he was named the pitching coach in mid-2022 when he replaced Wes Johnson. Those aren't necessarily the results of a guy who would keep his job 3 or 4 years later with a new manager, but they believe in him. And there's certainly stuff you can point to where he's done well. And like I said, their expected numbers are always much better than their actual numbers. Although that over the course of 3 or 4 years would lead me to say, why are their actual numbers
That's right.
not that good? But so Mackey stays on the hitting side. This time last year, they had fired David Popkins and Derek Shelton, the assistant hitting coach, and Rudy Hernandez, the other assistant hitting coach. They blew out their entire hitting department. Popkins, of course, went to the Blue Jays and had tremendous success. They hired to replace him 3 people, one of which, Matt Borgschulte, had been the Twins' AAA hitting coach and then went to Baltimore for a couple of years. They brought him back. It went very poorly, to say the least, from a lineup perspective.
Right. Yes.
And they fired him. And I'm told he had years left on the contract.
Yes.
So,
he was a multi-year contract. Yeah.
Yeah. And they replaced him with Keith Beauregard, who had been an assistant hitting coach with the Tigers and had been let go by the Tigers, I think earlier this month. I don't know a ton about him, but what I've been told about him is he got some good reviews working with, the Riley Greens, Spencer Torkelson, some of the younger Tigers hitters, which is a priority for the Twins because they need to get their young hitters on track. So from more of a player development standpoint versus like a working with veteran standpoint, that's a point of emphasis. And then the other thing I was told about Beauregard is from like an energy and vibes standpoint, he's just much more energetic.
Okay.
Or much more of a personality than Borgschulte. Now, to me, if you can teach hitting and keep guys on track, I don't care if you're a mute. It doesn't matter. But that is what I was told about Beauregard.
But I think one of the things that we'll talk about this in a second because the assistant batting coaches were both retained, is that they didn't feel like they had the right mix. Like for whatever reason, they just didn't feel like it's not like they didn't think that they had good teachers up there, good hitting coaches. They just didn't feel like they had the right mix to engage all of the different players.
That is identical to what they said last year.
Well, maybe
when they fired David Popkins and both assistants.
Yeah.
And it was somewhat similar to what they said when firing Rocco Baldelli, which is, we don't think this guy's a bad manager.
Right.
We just needed a new voice. We don't think Matt Borgschulte or David Popkins are bad hitting coaches. We just needed a new voice. Well, okay. Like you said, the 2 assistants are retained, Trevor Amicone and Raiden Sierra. So that's kind of interesting. You brought 3 guys in and you fired the main guy and kept the 2 assistants.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. Also, similar to LaTroy Hawkins, they brought in Grady Sizemore, who was a great major leaguer for about 5 years for the then Cleveland.
Yeah.
One of the better all-around players I've ever seen. Gold Glove center fielder, 30-40 steals at a high clip, drew 100 walks, 30 homer power. Just an MVP caliber player in his mid-20s, and then injuries just wrecked his career. He was basically out of baseball as a player by 30. Has been with the White Sox recently. He actually was an interim manager for them at one point. He has been brought in as the first base coach, base running coach, and outfield coach, which makes a lot of sense. Base running is tied to first base much more than third base on that regard. And then Ramon Borrego, who had been the first base coach last year, prior to that was the Twins' Double-A manager. They retained him.
Yeah.
He got a lot of good marks. So he moves from first base coach to third base coach, but he'll continue to have an emphasis on infield work, which if you go early to target field before a game, you can see him working with Luke Keisho. You can see him, Brooks Lee. He's putting him through drills.
Royce Lewis.
I
know that he received some of the credit for the improvement we saw in Royce Lewis's defense.
So he's one of the coaches that is retained. Grady Sizemore brought in from the White Sox. And then one other interesting one, I think this is the last one, is Toby Gardenhire, who is, of course, Ron Gardenhire's son and has been the AAA St. Paul Saints manager for the last 5 years. He joins the big league staff as the field coordinator, which Mike Ribello, who's the assistant bench coach who came from Pittsburgh, where he was with Shelton,
Right.
that was the role he filled in Pittsburgh. And I've asked around about like what is a field coordinator? Like tell me what this is to some people in other organizations. And what they basically said is it can be anything. It's typically much more emphasis on sort of planning and scheduling, and you're the guy who determines, which drills are being done when, and you kind of keep things humming. You kind of keep things moving because the manager can't always do that. But also, I've talked to some people who are like, "Oh, the field coordinator specifically works on this." So we don't know what Toby Gardenhire's exact role is going to be, in terms of this guy coaches first, but he's been a AAA manager. So AAA managers have to do a lot. AAA managers aren't just in a CEO role because those staffs are smaller and all that. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he was brought in to kind of run a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, schedule stuff, plan stuff out. And I think he'll probably be a good fit. I mean, we have been asked a lot over the years, like, why isn't Toby Gardenhire a manager candidate? And our answer has not really ever been about Toby Gardenhire. It's about AAA managers in general.
Right. Yeah,
which
of course.
AAA managers are very rarely viewed as like managers in waiting. That's just not how major league teams operate.
That's what the bench coach is viewed as a lot of the time. Hitting coach, maybe pitching coach, maybe, but that's the equivalent of an offensive or defensive coordinator kind of being promoted to the head coach job, in football. But bench coach even more so in baseball. So there's a sort of the waiting area for we want to have this guy in here. We want to have him as a backup in case something happens to our manager, and also we would know that he'll probably be looking for a decent job if the team has any success, or a managerial job if the team has any success.
Yeah, I mean, AAA managers are just not. They're more kind of, I don't know. They're more kind of keep things moving there than making big decisions, because the decisions at AAA are being handed down from the majors. Like Toby Gardner has an ability, I'm sure, to put out different lineups and make different moves, but the idea, they want you to play the guys they tell you to play in the roles they tell you to play them. And so it's more about kind of behind the scenes. It's not, a AAA manager is not sort of getting reps as an in-game decision maker quite at the level you might expect.
Sure.
But with that said, he certainly earned his spot here. He was a player for the Twins in the minors, back when his dad was in the organization. And he's worked his way up, and he's been the Saints manager for the last 5 years. I do like the idea, pretty much any young player that the Twins have in 2026 will have been managed at AAA by Toby Gardenhire.
Right. That's right.
So I like the idea of those relationships. And then the same is sort of true of Borrego, who was at AA as of a couple years ago. Like, most of these guys have come through AA and AAA and been managed by Borrego and Gardenhire. So if you're bringing in a new manager who's been in Pittsburgh for the last year, and your bench coach and your assistant bench coach have no relationship to the Twins whatsoever previously, I do like the idea of adding a couple guys or having a couple guys on the staff who are like, oh, I've managed this guy for 2 years. I know this guy.
Right.
I know what helps him, what hurts him, all that stuff. So, and then the one domino effect from Gardenhire getting bumped up from AAA is Brian Dinkelman, who had been the AA manager. It sounds like he'll replace Gardenhire as the AAA manager. I know he's super well liked. It wouldn't surprise me if a year or two from now he's on the Twins major league staff too. He's also a former player.
Right.
I think got a cup of coffee in the majors, if I'm not wrong, like a decade ago.
I certainly remember his name. I can't believe I would remember his name that well if he was strictly minor leagues. But
I can't remember you. I can't think you remember anyone's name.
Creatine doesn't do miracles.
Yeah. Okay, so the last thing I'll say, and we got into a bigger discussion on this on the Patreon side where we kind of went through each guy's background and stuff, but it is interesting to me that they really, Shelton and Falvey and some others in the weeks leading up to this talked a lot about valuing major league playing experience on a coaching staff, that they wanted guys who spent time in the majors, who can look a guy in the eyes and talk to them major leaguer to major leaguer, basically.
Right.
And ultimately, they really only hired 2 guys in Hawkins and Sizemore who fit that description. Ribello had some time in the majors as like a third catcher type, but that's on the short side for major league experience as players, as a coaching staff. And a lot of the other guys, some of them didn't play any affiliated professional baseball. And then a lot of them, including Shelton, topped out at like single A
Sure.
in the minors. So there isn't a lot of high level playing experience in this group. And I'm not one who thinks that is a prerequisite for being a good coach. I think it's been proven over decades that it's not.
Right.
But it is interesting that this is the group they wound up with, and it's very, very light on major league playing experience after they seem to indicate that they were going to lean into that more. And they just fired a manager who played 8 years in the majors and replaced him with a guy who didn't get past single A.
So and lost Hank Conger too, who's also a guy who played in the majors 6-7 years. So I mean, it's basically, it seems like they've got about the same amount of experience that they had prior to this. You know, couple of guys.
Yeah, I mean,
both of these guys
himself has 22 years, so that's a lot.
Both of these guys have a lot longer careers than the guys that they're replacing. But
yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. One other bit of news that we can touch on was the MLB announcement earlier this week that they have a new television deal for the next 3 years. And the reason everything is 3 years is they're planning for 2029 to have all of their television and media rights up, free agency. Because they're hoping at that point that all the local television situations have been worked out so that as many teams as possible are sort of free agents, that they can bundle them together. They can offer all this stuff. They're also obviously hoping that the CBA changes some things. But
we're not talking all 30 of the teams would necessarily have their expiration at 2028, because I think some of them own their own networks and so on. But as many as they can, they would be available after 2028. They've been trying to line that up.
We'll see if there are such thing as networks in 2028.
Yes, exactly right.
But in the meantime, they did a 3-year deal with 3 different entities here. One, ESPN, where they've had a relationship with it for 30 years, although that's significantly changing. We'll get to that in a second. The other one is Netflix. And what they basically have sold to Netflix is one opening day game featuring the Dodgers, one home run derby.
Okay.
And then what was the third thing? There was some other weird
Field of Dreams.
Yeah, the Field of Dreams game, which the Twins are playing against your wife's beloved Phillies. So I'm assuming you'll be there for that in Iowa.
I'm hoping so.
The Netflix package is an interesting one, and apparently Netflix is paying, I say only, $50 million a year for basically 3 kind of one-off events: an opening day game, the Field of Dreams game, which is a regular season game, and then the home run derby.
Amazing.
Now, $50 million sounds like a lot, I guess, and it is, but that's less than $2 million per team.
Well, I
like
guess.
in terms of additional revenue.
Right.
Like, okay, you just paid for Alex Jackson with that Netflix deal. Congratulations. And then the other one that they sold to is NBC/Peacock, and they are taking over Sunday Night Baseball from ESPN. And then they're also getting some other things with their futures game, the draft, and some other regular season games too. Those deals I think are for like a couple $100 million a year, that deal.
Okay.
And then the ESPN situation where ESPN opted out of a $1.6 billion remaining on the contract with MLB, and now have given up Sunday Night Baseball, which now goes to the NBC side. But what they've gotten now, and it's interesting, they agreed to restructure the deal at the same price point, which is $1.6 billion over 3 years. So clearly MLB said, we need the exact amount of money that you just opted out from.
What can we give it to you?
They gave them was MLB TV. They just gave them the whole thing.
That's right.
Which seems like a lot more than Sunday Night Baseball. And so the reaction to that among Twins fans, and we talked about this going back months when this was a rumor, and it ended up playing out exactly as it was reported at the end of the season. But understandably, a lot of questions from Twins fans who are sick of having the way they watch the team change year after year after year. And I get it. We're sick of having to talk about it, believe me. But we both talked to a Twins official right before this news became public a couple days ago. And what we were told, and we can only go by what we were told, obviously.
It was emphasized over and over and over again.
Yes. Not from the Twins' perspective, in terms of local fans' ability to watch local broadcasts. Nothing is changing for 2026. Now,
Right.
I make no promises beyond 2026 because
Right.
I suspect the reason ESPN did this is to force people to pay for ESPN. But for 2026, everyone's understanding is that you will not need to pay just to get the ESPN app and then need to pay for MLB TV or Twins.tv, same thing. The way I would describe
which was somewhat
it,
the fear when the news broke, that when the news leaked that Major League Baseball and ESPN were talking about something like this, a rights deal, a distribution deal for their baseball stuff and MLB.tv. The concern was, hold it. Does this mean everything's going to be different? We're going to have to switch to the ESPN app. We don't have the major MLB.tv, the MLB app. Like, what does this mean? What does it mean? And what does it mean for TV as well?
Right.
And the answer is, for 2026 at least, it doesn't mean anything. It means
right. You can, if you watch them on cable, you can still watch them on cable. They'll have that standalone channel. If you watch them on satellite, which I do, they will still, on DirecTV, it'll be 668-3 or whatever it was. Right. That is staying the same. And if you watch them through twins.tv streaming, that will be the same. I would describe this, I guess, in a couple ways, where if people are like, well, so what's the point of this? Well, I think for the future, the point is ESPN's going to start charging people, but we'll cross that bridge when they get there. For 2026, I would describe it as the Twins and 5 other teams have been under the MLB production umbrella for last year for the Twins, last several years for some other teams. And what that means is it's all the same graphics, it's all the same camera shots that MLB has on MLB Network, and it's, if you watch the Guardians game, it's the same, kind of graphics package and looks and cameras as the Twins. What's really changing, it'll still kind of be under that production umbrella, but now, in addition to being able to just buy it from MLB TV, it will also be for sale on ESPN shelves. Right. Is kind of, and ESPN is obviously hoping that because it's on our shelves, that'll get people to come into our store, and then maybe when they're in the store, they'll look around and want some ESPN stuff. Now, it would not surprise me 2 years from now or 3 years from now if ESPN started saying, okay, to get MLB TV for, let's say, $150 a year, or even just Twins TV for $129 a year, whatever it was. Right. First, you have to spend $150 a year or $100 a month, whatever it is, to get the ESPN app. Now, if that ends up being the case, that sucks. Right. That's a worse situation for Twins fans. But we don't have any knowledge of that other than, skepticism or cynicism. And
we should say, like, this is a 3-year deal. So, like, we know what 2026 is going to look like. We don't know what 2027 or 2028 is like. We really don't have any idea what 2029 and forward is going to look like. There's a part of the appeal of this deal.
Nobody does.
Major League. No, nobody does.
Because the CBA is there's going to be a lockout between now and then anyway.
Well, that's another good point as well. Yeah. I mean, part of the appeal of this to Major League Baseball was like, okay, we don't have to pull the rug out from all the people that had to go through, major changes in 2025 or 2024 in the case of like the Padres and stuff, when, some of those other 6 teams had to make the switch midway through the season. We get to have a deal that expires in 3 years. Like, that's important to us because we want to try and shop around the same sort of thing that we've got with these 6 teams now with 16 teams or 18 teams or how many teams they end up getting. Right. And we also get the same amount of money that we were going to get previously from ESPN for this. And so in the meantime, we've got a 3-year sort of moving target, for lack of a better word. But in 2026, it ain't moving much for Twins fans. So that's
right. So that's, I think good. I know we still heard a lot of complaints, but if you wanted to watch the Twins this past season, and if you want to watch the Twins in 2026, you can very easily do it. And I think in a way that isn't that difficult or crazy expensive or anything like that. And we were also told, or I was told, that from a local production side, in terms of who's working on the games, in front of the camera, in front of the mic, behind the scenes, there's no huge changes expected on that front. This is not a way for ESPN to ESPNify all these broadcasts. ESPN is not firing local announcers and bringing in their own announcers. They're not bringing in their own sideline people. They're not doing that. All
this
they are
is a distribution rights deal. It's not.
They are the umbrella over
the
thing. They are not. Maybe the graphics will change or whatever. But so that's good news. I don't want to.
It's certainly possible that the Twins and Major League Baseball will make some changes in sort of how they do their broadcasts and so on. But it's not as a result of ESPN taking over any of the production pieces.
Trust me, the last thing ESPN wants to have to do is hire 30 local broadcasts. Like, it's not what they want to do. And I'm not going to spoil anything individually. People can make their own announcements about their plans for the season, but No big changes on the local production side, I think is a good thing. Before we talk about Rule 5 protections, we still got to talk about, and then also a few other things that you talked to Falvey about. Although if you want an hour and a half about John's media sessions with Falvey, like go on the Patreon side. We literally just went like point by point
we
through.
we really think that they tipped their hand a little bit,
Yes.
sort of what their limited strategy is for this offseason. And it's a good listen.
But before that, let's talk about our last couple of sponsors here. One of which is Storyworth. Now, holidays are coming up here, and I know you've given this to family members in the past,
and I'm really glad I did.
Yeah, it's a great holiday gift because A, it's very thoughtful, as we'll discuss in a moment, but B, there's no delivery required.
Yes.
It just shows up. It's digital. And so if you are like me and you wait until the last second, this is a great last second gift too, because it'll just show up. And the way Storyworth works is if you get it for, let's say, your mom or your dad or a family member or something, shows up, email it to them, and it kind of prompts them with questions about their life on a weekly basis. Questions that they probably haven't thought about for years. Like, what was your first job? Right. Or, who was your first friend? Or what, just it kind of nudges them into writing little stories about their life. But more than that, thinking about stories from their life. And then the beauty is it's a weekly prompt for that. They fill it out. And then at the end of the year, you can make a literal physical book that is almost like an autobiography at that point. And it can sort of be a gift for them, but it can be a gift for the rest of the family too, where it's like, oh, here's mom's entire life as she tells it, basically. And super easy gift.
Yeah.
I know you've done it for
we've done it. I give it to my mom, I give it to my dad, and I'll tell you, it was one of those things where you don't really necessarily know that much about your parent. You don't really know what they experienced when they were young, when they were trying to figure things out in the world in the same way that you've been trying to do. And you're watching that as a kid. It's a lot different than watching it later on as an adult. So I really am glad that I gave that to my parents before they both passed and got to know them a little bit better and became something I could talk to them about as they age. So here's what you do. You give your loved one a unique keepsake you'll all cherish for years, Storyworth memoirs. Right now, you save $10 or more during their holiday sale when you go to storyworth.com/Gleeman. That's Storyworth, story, WORTH.com/Gleeman to save $10 or more on your order.
And then our last sponsor, Harry's Razor, is one of our longest time sponsors.
That's right. They, I think the only person happier, I'm probably not the most happy person in my family that I found Harry's Razors and Harry's Plus. I think it's Chrissy, because I did not understand that my face was scratching up her face every time my face touched hers. And now I don't have to worry about that anymore because I always have a sharp razor. It's so sharp that I shave both with the grain and against the grain every morning. I end up with a super smooth face, and I don't have to worry about running to the store and unlocking stuff and paying twice as much as I think it should be. All of that is just taken care of with Harry's and Harry's Plus right now. So I would, if you haven't tried Harry's, I don't know exactly, it's been around for 10, 15 years. I don't know exactly what to say to convince you. You should maybe give it a pull. What we will do is give you a special deal, and you can give that yourself. You can also give that as if you know somebody in your family who give it as a Christmas present this year.
Yeah,
so
they sent us this trial set that we're going to talk about here.
Yes,
and we both used it.
Yes.
It's great. Like they send it to, and that's the beauty of Harry's. You don't have to go to a store and beg some annoyed person to open a case for you and give you the razor. And what that ends up doing is then your razor's worn out months later, and you're like, I'll stick with this worn out old razor because I don't want to have the annoyance of going to a store. They'll send it directly to you. A couple clicks, it shows up a few days later. So for a limited time, our listeners can get the Harry's Plus trial set for only $10. You go to harrys.com/Gleeman. The set, you get the all new Harry's Plus razor. You get a 5-blade cartridge, you get 2 ounces of foaming shave gel, and you get the travel cover to protect your blades on the go. They sent it to us. It's great, great packaging. You'll like it. Just head to harrys.com/Gleeman to claim the offer. And after your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. You can support the show and tell them Gleeman and the Geek sent you. That's HARRYS, harrys.com/Gleeman. Okay, so we'll go through the Rule 5 stuff. We talked about this more on the Patreon side again. Go to Patreon. It's cheap. We can get
And
through this
fun.
together, people.
Right. That's right.
Like group therapy.
That's right.
So Rule 5 deadline, the deadline to protect prospects, newly eligible prospects from the Rule 5 draft was Tuesday. No big surprises on the Twins front. And the way it works real quickly is based on when a player was signed or drafted, 4 or 5 years later, they become eligible for the Rule 5 draft. And to protect that player from being selected in the Rule 5 draft, all you have to do as a team is add them to the 40-man roster. And this happens every offseason. A handful, every team adds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players, sometimes 6, 7 players, depending on that class, how well developed that class of players is, to the 40-man roster. That protects them from the Rule 5 draft. So, which is in 3 weeks.
Right. At the winter meetings.
Yes. December 9th, I think it'll be. So the Twins, so I wrote an article and we kind of went through the article on the podcast where I listed the 10 most prominent prospects who are eligible for the Rule 5 draft and in need of being shielded from it. So they ended up protecting the top 5 names on my list, plus a 6th player in John Klein, who I had ranked 8th. But as we discussed on the podcast a few days ago, he was kind of a rising guy. So it's not surprised that he was the 6th protection. So the names that they protected, the 5, what I viewed as kind of no-brainers, or I would have been shocked if they weren't added: Connor Prelip, Gabriel Gonzalez, Kendry Rojas, Andrew Morris, Hendry Mendez. Rojas and Mendez were acquired at the trade deadline. Rojas was in the Louis Varland deal with the Blue Jays. Mendez was in the Harrison Bader deal with the Phillies.
You don't acquire those guys if you're not planning on protecting them from the Rule 5 draft. Right?
Yes. Klein, a little bit different in that he was undrafted. He's a local kid, had really a breakthrough year. As I talked about, the issue when you have a guy who has a breakthrough year and they're in the high minors, so he did most of it at AA and then finished the year at AAA, that's a lot of scouting eyes on that player at AA and AAA when they're having that breakthrough year. And if you leave them unprotected, it only takes one team to have had a scout submit a really glowing scouting report on a AA rising prospect to have you go, we'll stick him in the bullpen. And so I get why the Twins protected him. Like I said, no big surprises there. The most prominent prospects that they chose not to protect, who are now at risk of being selected, I would say are Kalai Rosario, who's a right-handed hitting corner outfielder, who was also left unprotected last year and went unpicked, but then had a 25 homer, 30 steal season at AA. CJ Culpepper, who's been a off injured but pretty effective right-handed starting pitcher who spent most last year at AA. He was left unprotected. Kyler Fedko, who had been kind of a non-prospect until this past season, where between AA and AAA, he, I think, went 25-25 or 30-30. Bunch of power, bunch of steals. He can play all 3 outfield spots, got some speed, right-handed hitter, but he's also 26 years old. He's, kind of a marginal prospect. Then you got some guys, Jose Alvarez, Ricardo Olivar, that type of guy. It wouldn't surprise me if they had one or more of those guys picked in the Rule 5 draft. I think Fedko especially kind of fits the description of what a lot of teams look for in the Rule 5, which is just, we need a backup outfielder and we don't have one. Similar to the Twins catching situation that we talked about. Yeah. They don't have an Alex Jackson that they can lean on in the system. Some team could just go, we need a 4th outfielder, right-handed hitter, got some speed, got some pop, Kyler Fedko. On the other hand, like we talked about, he had a really, really good breakout season between AA and AAA, and they did not call him up in September, which suggests to me that they're just not believers in him.
Yeah, to me, the Culpepper one was the one that I'm probably most worried about, or I was most surprised with. I thought that he would make the cut. Maybe I don't know that I would take him over any of the other 6 guys, but I thought that he was going to be the room for the 7th that they would try to do. His prospect status definitely faded last year as he went through a 3rd year of sort of injuries, etc. But injuries aren't necessarily a bad thing in the Rule 5 for somebody that you grab on the Rule 5 draft. But ultimately, I think the fact that he seemed to be continuing to struggled with his control so much last year, AA ended up being a problem. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. So that's your Rule 5 situation. We should also note they have what are they, pick 5th? Something in the Rule 5 draft? Because the record was so bad.
Yeah, I suppose so.
So they haven't generally taken many guys, although they took Iverson Castellano 20th or something like that.
Something like that last year.
or maybe in the middle of the round from
15th,
the Phillies.
I was
And
going
then
to say, yeah.
15th, okay. And then sent him back at the end of spring training because he couldn't throw strikes in spring training. But they've generally not picked, and certainly not picked and kept, Rule 5 guys. But it's going to be tempting when you have all sorts of roster needs.
I was going to say, especially you can often pick up bullpen guys, right? Like
Right.
that's where you end up getting, and this team needs bullpen arms. Like I wouldn't be shocked if that's one of the 2 or 3 or 4 low wattage reliever moves they make
Right.
this offseason is a Rule 5 pick.
I mean, one thing you can always find in terms of exposed to a Rule 5 draft, especially if you have like one of the top picks in the Rule 5 draft by virtue of a bad record, some hard throwing AA reliever who can't throw strikes that another team is like, should we protect him? You just pick who you fell in love with scouting wise and hope it works out for them. So, but of note, you have to have an open roster spot, an open 40-man roster spot. On the it just needs to be open, as the Rule 5 draft is underway.
Right.
At the moment, the Twins have a full roster, and in fact, they had to cut Kersey to add Jackson.
Right.
But we may find out later tonight that they're dropping, let's say Larnach maybe, certainly. I'm not trying to be mean, but there's a lot of guys who can still be cut from this 40-man roster on a position player side. Pareda, Gasper, McCusker.
They made a lot of 40-man cleanup moves before, 2-3 weeks ago, but they were almost all on the reliever side, very few on the position player side. And taking a look, there's still some, moves they can make as they did with Kersey.
So, okay, let's finish up here with kind of a Cliff Notes version of your experience at the GM meetings in Vegas.
Sure.
I'm not so much interested in the debauchery and the drinking and the fact that your wife won $1,000 playing video poker.
However, am very interested in
we got it. Believe me, we discussed that on the Patreon.
Exactly right. Yeah,
that's the uncensored version.
That's
John was. Yeah. You've never heard so much prostitution talk. Just kidding. Or am I? But you go there because you get FaceTime with the front office.
That's right.
And you had a couple different sessions. It was you, Dan Hayes, and Bobby Nightingale, right? Were the media there?
Yeah.
With Falvey. And you sent me like the transcripts to look over, and then we discussed it. And so, my initial takeaway, and I kind of questioned you step by step on it.
Sure.
It's kind of more interviewee on the Patreon side. But my takeaway from it was not dissimilar from the media sessions we had with him twice already this offseason at the end of the regular season when they fired Baldelli and then the day they hired Shelton, where he's like basically kind of tap dancing around questions about the outlook for 2026, tap dancing around the kind of free agency plans, tap dancing around the payroll stuff.
Questions, yeah.
But this one, because it was like 2 weeks later than the last one, and because it was a smaller group and it wasn't on TV or anything, it felt like he was a little more straightforward about what's really going on, at least from my perspective, which is, we talked about this at the beginning of the show, but to reiterate it, like, it seemed like a guy basically saying to you, I am still waiting for clarity from ownership.
Yeah,
right?
I would say I think he's in exactly that same position that he was the last 2 or 3 times that we talked to him. I mean, that much was clear. But what happens at the general managers meetings, and the more general managers you talk to, the more you kind of get this sense. This is their first chance of kind of seeing what everybody else is doing, or having a lot of conversations with, guys at their level, and trying to get a sense of what the free agent market looks like, what other teams are trying to do, what the sort of mood is in terms of, an upcoming CBA, that sort of thing. And so I think the goal of most general managers, and I think to some extent, is to come out of those general manager meetings with some sense of, here's the strategies we were kind of looking for, and here's what I think is going to make sense for us. Like, I think you start putting the pieces together in your mind there. And I got the sense that between the times that we talked to him, there's no more clarity on sort of what what is available to him in terms of his own resources to be able to throw at the free agent market. So I think he's just taking the, not the worst case scenario, but a pretty conservative scenario on that. But I think he does have a sense of sort of like looking at the market and talking to other people. Here's what I think is going to be available and what we can pick up at a reasonable price. And, here's what I think that, what the first baseman market looks like. Here's what the backup catcher market looks like. Here's what the reliever market looks like. And I think this is probably the way we're going to at least start planning things. And I think the way they're going to start planning things is a fairly low payroll, something like in the 100 to 100 maybe $10 million range. They're going to hang on to. I think another thing you get a sense of for that is like how much are some of the assets that we have worth out there? Like, am I going to be able to get a king's ransom for Pablo Lopez or Joe Ryan or Ryan Jeffers? Some of the things that you might be. And for whatever reason, I think the sense I got is that not, and the thing he said over and over again, we're not trying to subtract, we're trying to add, right?
No, he said, my goal
my
is
hope,
to not
right? Yeah,
subtract.
that's right, exactly right.
I mean, I got a lot of hopes and dreams.
Yeah.
None of them have come true. Believe
Do
me,
you really though?
I did. As I stare at you now, no, for the 8,000th
those have all
episode.
given up. Yeah, that's
no,
right.
those are gone.
That's right.
At one point, yeah.
It doesn't look. I don't think they're in any hurry to trade away any of their pitching. But then that limits them if they're not going to move any salary off the books there. That limits them in what they're going to do. And I think what you're going to see is a lot of low wattage reliever acquisitions and a couple of low wattage lineup acquisitions that are filling in, backup roles or short side of platoons, or maybe somebody to kind of help out with the DH spot a little bit, and call it a day. Which by the way sounds pretty similar to the last two off seasons that they've had. I don't think that's good news, but it's also not, we're waiting to see who they trade Pablo Lopez, Joe Ryan to. I don't get the sense that is a high alert or a high likelihood after that. So
I will tell you, there's been quite a few reports lately that Pablo Lopez is actively being discussed in trades.
Oh, that's good.
From non-Minnesota stuff.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to say this isn't a worst case scenario, I think this is part of
it ain't a great case scenario.
Continually lowering expectations to a point that you're saying they might have $110 million payroll, and that's not the worst case scenario. I mean, yeah, I guess. But the thing I get stuck on is, going into this, we were like, well, what are the really just gaping holes on this roster? And there are plenty of them. But, obviously you need to rebuild the bullpen.
Right.
Because you have no bullpen at this point. You need a backup catcher for Vasquez, which apparently Alex Jackson is going to fill.
Right.
And, from my point of view, you need a actual big bat at first base and probably at DH.
Yeah, I agree.
But what he seemed to indicate to you a week ago, was first base might just be Cody Clemens.
Maybe Cody Clemens for the left side, and then we'll maybe try and pick up a right-handed bat to pair with him. Right.
And I mean, to me, if that's the case, if you're going to have $110 million payroll and it's already at $95 million, that is going to be the reality. But if you're not even willing or able to go out and spend $8 million on an actual hitter at first base or DH for a lineup, by the way, has been terrible for a year and a half now. You're now on your third hitting coach in 3 years because nobody has stepped up.
Yeah.
And it's the same talking points that we've heard now for 2 years, which is like, well, we believe in the core of these hitters and we need these guys to step up.
And that was in fact what he talked about at the meeting. I asked straight up, like, do you even have like a semi-clear plan on how you're going to make the offense better? Like, do you have a semi-clear idea of what that strategy, what that path looks like? And the first thing he mentioned is, well, everybody has to hit better.
Right. That's not a plan. I mean, that's not a plan. Like, okay, great. That is literally what he said at this time last year, by the way.
Yeah, of course.
And they hit worse and got another hitting coach fired. But the other thing is, okay, even if that happens, why is that precluding you from also adding a good veteran hitter to this group at a position that is very easy to find decent bats because you don't have to worry about defense? There are always in the $5 to $10 or $12 million range. There are always good hitters who can be at first base and DH. And to me, if they're at a spot where like Cody Clemens is the default at first base, who was essentially a waiver claim, he's 31. He had a 94 OPS plus last year, and that's while being platooned against only righties. Like, yeah, he can pop some homers, and he's okay defensively, and he seems very likable. They like him a lot as a person in the clubhouse, but that is not a serious organization if that is your top of the depth chart at first base, and they still need a DH even in that circumstance. So
Right.
I guess my thing is like, this is not shocking to me. We're long past the point from a ownership or front office standpoint where we're shocked at them not investing in the team, having low expectations, having lowered payrolls. But they were at 160 3 years ago, 160 million. Then they were, the last couple of years, they've been in the 130 range. I'm not shocked that if it ends up in the low 100s at this point.
Yeah.
But I guess what I would say at that point is, if you're gonna, even going along with what you're saying, is maybe the vibe is they're not going to trade Lopez and Ryan, which is great because people like watching those guys. But what is the point of hanging on to those guys and then not providing any help whatsoever for the rest of the roster?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, you have a pretty good rotation. You don't have a bullpen. You got to line up again, counting on the same guys, younger guys who have struggled, and you're not bringing in, capable first base, DH, corner outfield, whatever it is. And I guess I don't want them to rebuild, because I think that's a rebuild is, takes longer than people think and is less successful than people think on average. But it's one thing to say, it seems kind of like they're not under pressure right now to trade those guys. But it's another thing to say, well, they could keep those guys and then they have, $9 million to go fill 4 roster spots.
That's right.
It's like, well, what kind of roster are you building around those guys? And at that point, could you just say you might as well trade him? Because
it's he does have a decision. If he doesn't have a lot of payroll room to work with, which I think he does not, right? And if you're right, he's got maybe $10 million to spend this offseason, something like that, right? Yeah. It becomes a legitimate question, like, well, do you lean into your starting pitching depth, which they don't like to trade away starting pitching depth, right? They haven't really done that. Do you want to lean into your starting pitching depth to free up $20 million, so now you have $30 million to spend on those 4 free agents?
I'm not even saying that.
But no, but I mean that I'm not saying that but I think
I'm saying the opposite of that. Like,
I think that's what Falvey's thinking, though.
No, that doesn't make any logical sense. Because if you trade those guys, then what's it matter if you bring in a first baseman? The team's going to be horrible. Well, if you trade Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan, the last thing you need is just an okay first baseman. The team's going to be terrible at that point. What I'm saying is, in the circumstance in which you keep those guys, which is great, those are very good pitchers. Why would you not want to keep them? But if you're keeping them and then you're not doing anything else to the roster, you're just running back a team that lost 90-something games last year. I'm not
running back a team that was also August and September, which was even worse.
And I guess, I'm not suggesting trading Lopez to free up money to go sign a 32-year-old first baseman. That doesn't make any sense, because at the point at which you trade Lopez, why are you even in the market for a 30? If you're going to trade those guys, you could have a $3 payroll. It doesn't matter. The team's going to be abysmal. What I'm saying is, if you are going to retain those 2 guys specifically, but also Jeffers, Buxton, obviously, your few remaining good veteran players, that's not enough to be a good team. I mean, you have to fill in the blanks with bullpen. You have to fill in the blanks with first base. You have to do some other things to provide some help. Otherwise, it's just like you're just setting yourself up to trade those guys at the deadline when the first half goes poorly. And maybe that is the plan.
Maybe that is the plan. I mean,
which is okay. I'm not shocked by that either.
I mean, what you're saying, I think, is, listen, if you're going to keep those guys, you need to find another $20 million to spend on free agents. But if the response is, I can't get the $20 million, like I can't, that's not coming to me. I can't open. Well, Falvey doesn't have $20 million to throw into the payroll bucket, right? Well, then what? Do you tear it down? Do you be more selective about the trades? Trade maybe Pablo, but keep Ryan and free up some money that way? Or do you say, okay, F it, we'll lean on our pitching, unless we get a really good offer on one of our pitching, which I think is still a possibility.
Right.
And we'll get a really cheap right-handed hitting first baseman. We'll hang on to Larnach to play DH. We'll pick up 2 or 3 other relievers for $2 or $3. We'll call it a day, call it an off season, and see what happens next year. We put our hope in, guys improving. I mean, that's not, I don't think that's a terribly exciting strategy or even optimistic strategy. But what do you do if you don't have the money? If you're being squeezed. So I don't know.
Right. I mean,
I guess I'm saying I'm empathetic to the decisions he's being forced to make here, given that payroll
yes.
limitation.
And I mean, I don't know that we've been effective at this, but we've certainly over the years tried to really differentiate between the front office and ownership. And this is a prime example of why that's needed. Like you said, he can't just invent $20 million if they're not giving him that money to spend. But what I would say is, their payroll right now is $95 million.
Yeah.
Their payroll 15 years ago was $113 million. The second every year at Target Field. Major League payroll since then have almost doubled. Yeah. And we're sitting here at a point where we're like, will they even get to 110 to where they were 15 years ago? And I just want to emphasize how I won't say how effing pathetic that is. I would have sworn on the Patreon. I mean, that is just bottom of the barrel ownership that doesn't care, and this BS about, well, we got to wait till the. What have you been doing for the last 3 months with these minority partners? You just what they've been hiding from you? You haven't been able to communicate with them. You have no sense of investment or anything. And so I do have empathy for the front office and for Derek Falvey. But I guess ultimately, one thing, I don't care anymore. Right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me that much to differentiate anymore. Like, yes, if you say to me who's to blame for this situation, I will start and probably end with ownership. And I really would encourage everyone to think of it through that lens. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. Like, they are in such a horrible position, such a pathetic position, that we're sitting here talking about, well, if they keep their 2 good starting pitchers, then they probably won't have any money to bring in any help to surround them with any good, competent veteran players. And then the other thing is, or they could trade their only 2 remaining good starting pitchers, and hey, then they'd have money to add a first baseman. But it's like, well, what's the point at that point? Right. Or should they just blow the whole thing up? None of those are like acceptable to me. Like, none of those are logical or sensible or fun or anything but frustrating. And yes, I have empathy that Falvey is the one being put in that position. But by the way, that's why this time last year I was telling them trade some of these core guys. And instead they let them all die on the vine to the point that a bunch of these hitters don't have any trade value anymore. So you can't necessarily shake up the core, by trading secondary players or anything, because half of them aren't even anything anymore. And so I guess it's 3 choices, none of which are appealing. One is you can keep your 2 very good fan favorite starting pitchers. So, I start that sentence and people go, yeah, that's the one you want. But then you can't bring in anything else really of note for a lineup that desperately needs help, for a bullpen that desperately needs help. Well, what is going to be the result of that? Mediocrity at best, and probably just leads to trading those guys in July instead of January. Then the other choice is, well, you could just trade those guys now, in which case then you have 2 new scenarios, which is, well, now you trade Pablo Lopez. Well, guess what? You've cleared $20 million. You can go sign relievers. You can go sign a first baseman, except I would say, well, why would you need that? Your team is no longer competitive because you've just traded your best starting pitcher. Right. Or you trade both those guys, and then, as you noted, then you just lean fully into a rebuild, in which case the team's going to be horrible for the next, not just year, but maybe several years. And it's so crazy to me that the 4th option, which is the most logical option, which is you have a $95 million payroll, keep those 2 starting pitchers, try to develop all the young guys, sign 2 or 3 veteran relievers for $3 to $5 million each, sign a guy who can hit 20 homers and play first base for $10 million, sign a DH, sign a this, and you'll still, by the way, have a $120 million payroll. Sure. It'll still be $40 million less than it was 3 years ago. It'll still be $65 million less than the major league average payroll. And it is like infuriating, and I suspect a lot of fans are with me, that is like, doesn't seem like that's the option at all.
Right. Yep.
Like, at least from what they're saying, and who knows?
It's penny wise, pound foolish strategy.
Right. Where it's like,
we've been saying it for 3 years.
Yeah. It's like, we'll either keep our good guys and do nothing to build, or we'll get rid of our good guys, to, I don't know, be bad for 3 years. And it's like, what if you kept your good guys and also spent the bare minimum? But it turns out bare minimum, people have different definitions of bare minimum. So yeah, that was, and this is just reading between the lines of what Falvey said to you, obviously, but that certainly goes along with the continued answers about uncertainty from ownership. Because look, if you boil this down, if he thought those answers from ownership, even if they're delayed, were going to be positive, he would hint at that.
Well, and I'm also not even sure that it matters. I don't know if it matters so much as to who the owners are and what the new owners are, limited owners are, and what they want, as much as is like, how much do they know? I'm not sure they totally know how much they're receiving in cash as part of that limited thing, because depending on how much cash they get, well, that buys down $500 million in loan. And if you're buying down the full $500 million in loan, well, then that's, $50 million less in interest and principal payments that you've got to make next year. Well, that by itself, if you're only getting 200 million or 300 million, now you got 20 to 30 million going into that. Like, maybe that's where the budget is the problem. Not so much as to what the new owners want, but as much as, do we have to continue to pay off this loan and take that as a hit to our liquid cash in our budget? And I mean, none of that's speculation on my part. I should just call that out. I don't know what the issues are surrounding trying to determine what the budget is, right?
By the way, when you go literally 3 months without giving any details after making a public announcement about this, do you know what happens? People speculate about
as to what is going on here, right?
By the way, Twins PR 101 at this point, which is just overpromise, underdeliver, and then get mad when people speculate about the information you have not provided.
So my bottom line is, I mean, I'm empathetic, sympathetic to Falvey in the position he finds himself in. He's going to make one of these three crappy choices. Right. Yeah, he doesn't get the fourth choice, as much as it's frustrating as hell for a fan base to be able to do that. But what I got the sense from is that he's leaning towards the choice where it is, I'm going to hang in. I'm going to do what I've always emphasized, what we have seen from Falvey for the last 7-8 years that he's been in this role. Hang on to your starting pitching, because that's a different animal than other depth. Lean into that, count on that, and then we'll figure out the rest. We'll be quote creative about the bullpen, right? Which is and then as creative that they can be about the lineup. And I grant you, that gives us the team that we saw in September and October, or August and September. Not even the team that we saw in April and July, which by itself was disappointing. But the stuff we ran out there in August and September were like, whew, this is hard to watch. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's sort of the path we are down right now. So,
yeah, I mean, it is truly the same talking points as last offseason. Like, which, given how poorly the 2025 season went, it is remarkable to just be like, hey, we want all these 24 to 28-year-old hitters to step up. And it's like, you literally said that about the same 7 guys last offseason. Almost all of them got worse. Some in ways where you don't even have them anymore.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's where the lineup help's going to be from. It's okay, like what? Right. But let's say that doesn't happen, or let's say that only sort of happens. You're going to want someone better than Cody Clemens at first base anyway. So, yeah, I mean,
yeah, that is sort of the litmus test on this, isn't it? Like, that just seems like that's do you care or not? Yeah. Like, we got to have a 10 or 12 or $15 million investment at first base. You just have to. Or a DH, right? So,
and yes,
that's the GM meetings.
And is Chrissy willing to take that 1,000 she won and put it towards the bullpen at all?
Sure, absolutely, sure.
Okay, so then we can get a slight upgrade there, I guess, and we can finish on this. But like, keep in mind, like, I know, hopefully everyone can feel my frustration coming through the screen, and I don't mean it directed at John, but he's used to this. Don't have empathy for Johnny.
Yeah, just so we're clear, I feel his frustration coming through the screen on a myriad of other topics.
He's just less of a, I don't know, whatever. But I want everyone to keep in mind, we're not talking about this for a team that has a $150 million payroll today.
Right. Yeah. Right.
We're not talking about this for a team that is anywhere near average. They right now, and we'll see what happens with Larnach tonight and all that, but They have a $96 million payroll right now. That ranks 23rd in baseball. It is basically half of what the average salary is going to end up as across Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
It is $40 million below their payrolls for the past 2 seasons and $65 million below their payroll 3 seasons ago. And as I noted, it is basically $20 million below their payroll from 15 years ago.
Right.
That's what is the frustrating part. Again, we've never been a show that's like, they got to go sign Shohei Ohtani. They got to go trade for this super. We're asking for the bare minimum, or what we perceive to be the bare minimum.
Right.
And we continually find out that there is something lower than that. And so if you're having these sorts of discussions about a team that everyone involved with the Twins constantly is touting their starting rotation for good reason, at least right now.
Right.
And then you go, well, okay, you're at 95 million as a payroll right now. You claim to have a really good starting rotation. Obviously, go spend money on a bullpen that is completely blown out and a lineup that has not been good now for a year and a half. And when the answer to that is, I don't know that we got any resources for that.
Right.
That's what is infuriating to me, because it's like the entire premise, these things do not fit together.
Right.
Like, and it's like, well, Cody Clemens can be the first baseman. It's like, okay, fine, but are you going to go spend on the bullpen? It's like, no, probably not. Like, we might add a couple guys.
Right.
And so it's like, if you end up, I almost feel like $110 million payroll is the worst of everything.
Maybe. I mean, yeah, it is the middle of the road track here.
It is.
Yep.
Yes, it's not only the middle of the road for 2026, but I just feel it becomes so inevitable at that point that you aren't going to be good, and then you're just going to have to trade these guys at the deadline.
Yeah.
And maybe that is the plan, to kind of, be somewhat competent early on. But again, I'll go back. You're at 95 million. You're 40 million below where you were the last 2 seasons, and 60 something million below where you were 3 years ago. And we're talking about, well, Falvey's got his hand tied. He doesn't have 9 million to go sign a guy to hit 25. And then it's like, truly, what is this team?
Yeah.
And I know this has been a talking point for a year. This is just a new version of the rants that I've been on over and over, but it really does feel more and more that they are passing the time and passing the seasons until something changes, either with new ownership fully, a new CBA, a new something.
Yeah.
And I get that from their perspective, but you're just wasting people's lives at that point.
Yeah.
You're just wasting seasons, and you're wasting Byron Buxton's career, and you're wasting just everything. And it just feels so maddening to me that we're now at a point where what we assumed was the bare minimum of, ranking 21st in payroll and having $125 million payroll is now, they're like, whoa, big spender. Let's not get crazy with that. We can get to 107 with Cody Clemens and a couple of random waiver claims. And it's like, what are we even talking about at this point? And so it feels so just mind-numbing to me that I will still express the belief that they will not, if what you're getting a sense from talking to Falvey, and, the Occam's razor of, you can never expect too little from this ownership group, obviously. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, and the choice that they're kind of leaning into at the moment is, let's keep the starting pitching, let's get a bunch of cheap filler, and let's just see what happens. I will express the opinion again that they will not retain Pablo Lopez for a quarter of that team's payroll in that scenario. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. I'm not saying I want him traded, but that's one of those kind of bells that goes off during this type of discussion, which is like, if we really think that's the plan, are they really going to pay $21.5 million for a good prime age starting pitcher who, by the way, has some injury question marks now?
Sure, yeah.
And it's easy to say, well, they'll see what happens.
He did when they acquired him, too, for that matter. Right?
Well, he literally ended the year
right,
on the injured list and missed 3 months with a shoulder injury is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
it's fine to say, let's see how it goes in the first half. You never know. Maybe they'll be competent. Maybe they can make a run at a wild card. And if not, we can just trade these guys at the deadline. What if he's hurt again?
Yep.
Then you're not only paying him $21 million this year, you're paying him $21 million next year, and you can't even rebuild with him because he's out with an injury. And so I have a hard time seeing the logical connections in all this. As I've said, like, there are 4 ways to go here, and it seems like the 3 worst ones are sort of up for grabs with them.
Yep.
And if that's the case, unfortunately, my level of skepticism that Pablo Lopez is going to be on this roster opening day, Falvey saying he'd love to add and not subtract, does not do anything, because I'm just looking at the payroll and I'm looking at where this thing seems headed. And I'm looking at Lopez, where his value stands today, where his value could stand at midseason, the injury risk. And I just have a real hard time imagining them paying him $21.5 million out of, $107 million payroll for a team that they know damn well isn't going to go anywhere in that scenario. And then going, we'll trade him on July 30th. Well, guess what? You couldn't trade him this past July 30th because he was on the injured list for 3 months. So I hate that we're having these conversations. I hate that I go on these same rants, every 2 weeks or whatever. But man, when you think you're at the bottom, look down, because there's more with these Minnesota Twins.
If you don't want to hear Aaron go on these rants every 2 weeks, you could join us on the patreon.com, where you can hear him go on these rants twice or 2 or 3 times in a week.
With curse words. I say even more because we're, somewhat private there.
That's exactly right. We should probably, anything else you want to cover, or should we wrap it up?
No, I was trying to think did we say Hank Conger get a job with the Orioles?
I don't think we did. Yes.
Okay, so he had been the Twins' assistant bench coach. Right. They let him go. He latched on. He's now the bullpen coach with the Orioles, which is kind of interesting because you usually see pitchers be bullpen coaches, but the one position player who can be a bullpen coach is a catcher, because you work with pitchers on that front. So I'm glad to see. I wanted to end on a slightly less angry thing. I'm happy that Hank Conger,
I am too,
who I feel was
such a good guy,
not done great by the Twins in this scenario, latch on with another team in a big league role, and so I wish him the best. Randy Dobnak signed a minor league deal with the Mariners too. Yeah, right. So good for him.
Also signing a deal with the Mariners with Josh Naylor. We talked about that on the patreon.com/Nemo. So we'll react not just to the Twins news, to other major league news as we come across it. We want to thank our sponsors who kept today's episode free. That is Harry's Razors and Storyworth and Hims and Factor Meals and Momentous and BetterHelp. And a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Blackstack Brewing. It's now being distributed all of Greater Minnesota. Stop by your favorite liquor store or the Blackstack Tap Room to grab your favorite brew or try something new. And especially look for that Local Drops. Write that one down. Local Drops, flagship Northeast IPA, which is a collab between them and Barrel Theory. I'm definitely going to go looking for that later today. So
go join the Patreon, because it's the best way to support this show, which is if you've made it this far in this episode, you liked the show, or you hate it so much that you'd want to listen to it more. But beyond that, don't let me just rant into the darkness here. At least give me an audience to rant to. You know what I mean? Right. We're in this together. We can get angry together. We can have group therapy together. We can yell at John as a proxy for the poll ads together. And that can happen at patreon.com/Gleeman.
Yeah, I think we'll probably be having some special guests coming up. We've got our mailbag episodes coming up. We're going to have a complete free agent breakdown probably within the next week. I think we've got a big minor league review to go through on the agenda.
Unlike the Minnesota Twins, we are trying as hard as we can to provide a good product to our loyal customers.
That is correct.
That is literally all I think about at this point, basically. And ranting. I like to, those are all off the cuff. No one would ever plan this rant out. It would sound a lot better if I had it written down. Maybe I should start doing that.
Go ahead.
Do like Jim Rome style. I remember I used to listen to Jim Rome on the radio, and you could hear him crumpling his papers as he got through page 1 of his rant, and you could hear him be like, and another thing. Maybe I should start doing that.
If you want the best of the Gleeman rants, you might also want to check out the YouTube that we've got out there, youtube.com/Gleeman or youtube.com/Gleeman and the Geek or something like that. So
see all the weird faces I also make during
That's exactly right.
And how many times I look up at the air and try to find something.
See the blood slowly drain from his face.
Yeah. All right. Goodbye.
Bye. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Cleveland.